Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm here today with a good friend of mine, Yossi Goldberg. Yossi was originally from Manchester, then moved to Edgware and back to Manchester. Is actually starting a new yeshiva, hopefully coming this El. And I saw we started the Zoom video yesterday. I saw it said yeshiva will be opening up its doors soon or something. But that was the text of the opening of the meeting. I don't know if you did that customized, but that's how it looked. But Yossi starting a new yeshiva, and the yeshiva's name kind of gives away what the yeshiva is meant for. The yeshiva is called Binyan Odom, which in English means building oneself, building man, building a person. And we'd love to hear from you, Yossi. First, just a bit about yourself, and secondly, what is Binyan Odom about? What's behind the name? And why is this yeshiva different than other yeshivas? What exactly is it coming to inspire? What is it coming to accomplish? And yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Levi. First of all, I want to put on record that I think this podcast series that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal, and it's really awesome. So great work. I've listened to your previous guest, and it was really insightful. So it's great public service and much appreciated. And also, it's a personal privilege to be your third guest, I believe, on your podcast series. If it goes well, I'm happy to come back.
Yeah.
Let's see.
If you remember, we started our podcast and Jess used to give me car rides home. And we used to talk and say we should make a podcast, and look what happened.
Exactly. So I'm happy it's come to fruition. So look, I have had what you'd probably call a regular Haredi upbringing. I went to the local primary school, high school, and obviously in England it's different to America, where in my high school at least ended at 15, and then we went to yeshiva. Now the yeshiva I went to locally is kind of a yeshiva ketana and a yeshiva gedolah combined, so you basically can be there from age 15 to 20 straight for 5 years. I would say, definitely outwardly, I was considered a successful boy in yeshiva. I sort of gravitated to the staff, to the hanhola, to what was being taught. I very much drank up the ideology that was being shared, the direction of life that they wanted from us, besides obviously the Talmudic studies, etc. And at 20, I moved on, as is customary, to Israel, where I went to a yeshiva in Har Nof under the leadership of Rabbi Tzvi Kushelevsky. Was there for about a year, and then got engaged and got married back in the UK. Stayed in the UK, and then went with my wife to Israel. Went to the Meir, famous yeshiva in Yerushalayim, for about 4 years. After which I was itching with restlessness, wanted to get on with life, wasn't entirely sure what to do. Did a bit of private tutoring, did a bit of learning in the kollel, and then I came back to the UK. And what followed was about 4 years of just really trying to find my place, trying to find an avenue where I could balance, number one, the need to be of service, for me to express myself and give to the community and use my talents for the sake of helping others, which is always something that I've been ambitious about. And at the same time, create an income stream, parnasa for the family. And I really went from pillar to post trying to find my place, did a variety of different things. And because I'm naturally quite attuned to project management and organizational skills, I ended up helping different charities. And one of the charities that I came across helping was in fact the Better World Charity, which what I did at the time was help them set up this phenomenally sounding rabbinic training program. Spent about a year or so helping them set it up, and then decided I actually want to come and join it, which is why we moved from Manchester to Edgware, as you mentioned. And then you came along and joined us too. And we had this small group, which we've been together for about 2 years.
Right. So Yossi and I are part of the 2-year program, which just ended, the RTA, the Rabbinical Training Academy.
Yeah. So that was a phenomenal experience. As you know, we might talk about it some more soon. as I say, part of what I gained from the program was a much clearer idea of how I want to now go ahead and where I feel I can slot in. Which brings us nicely to your second question, which was this Yeshiva Binyan Odom. What is it about? What do I feel it's doing different? So as you well know, and I won't bore the listeners with the tremendous detail of this, but as you know, in broad terms, the yeshiva system is the current sort of regular conventional route for a Haredi from Orthodox boy. After having attended the normal schools, they go to yeshiva like I did. And yeshiva is an experience where one spends the entire time, almost 95% of the time, learning the theory and the sort of nitty-gritty of Torah law. So from the Gemara, you get into discussions about the meaning of different words and the background and the logic, and a lot of, I've no better term for it than nitty-gritty sort of work. It's backwards and forwards about finite svaras and, as I say, trying to understand the meaning behind the Torah, which can be very rewarding for those that do well with it. And my concern currently, and always has been throughout my own learning, has always been to worry about those that aren't doing that well. And that doesn't just mean academically, people who struggle with the social setup, people who struggle with the intensity, with the pressure, social pressure. And my heart always had a special place for people who didn't quite fit in. And I tried to do my bit as I went along in helping them as best I could, talking to them, learning with them, whatever it was. Essentially, what the yeshivas do is prepare for people to continue to learn and spend their days learning Torah, whether that's in a formal kollel, whether that's by themselves, whether that's in a position of teaching others. But that's what yeshivas really spend their time doing. They prepare you for a long-term life of continuing to learn. Oh, sorry about that. That was my computer making a funny noise. What about those large percentage of boys who don't end up staying within the walls of yeshiva long term? What about boys who, when they reach either before their marriage or after, go and get a job? What about that experience of finding a job, of trying to seek a career that works for them? Experiences which I struggled with myself. Who's helping them prepare for that? What about spiritual challenges that they might face, being for the first time in the real world, meeting secular Jews, meeting non-Jews, working with women, amongst the many, many other challenges that is very regular, very normal for people out in the workforce to face? No one's spending the time actually talking about those situations in advance. No one's opening up the conversation to say, let's talk about money. Let's talk about wealth. What does it mean? What's the Torah view on it? What's the meaning in it? How do we find our sense of purpose in life? It's a non-subject. So I wanted to create a yeshiva which was more than just a place where people could come and learn Gemara. But it could be a place which would be a wholesome preparation for real life. It'd be an opportunity for boys to be prepared by talking about, basically talking about and hearing from those that are in the fields of the various different professional lines of work or business and commerce, whatever it is, and to hear from them firsthand how they deal with life and what their advice is, and also for them to be guided and mentored on their own individual path to find their way.
Well, that's really cool because that's new. That's new, and I think there's one point that you might need to hone on a bit. Is the name of the yeshiva, which is, so there's two parts of this, right? There's preparing people for the greater world out there, which itself has two parts. It has the part of the physical part, the parnasa part, the business part aspect of how are they going to get a living, how are they going to support a family, and then you have the aspect of self-development, right? How are they going to interact with the world? How are they going to be as people? How are they going to interact with other people?
Yeah, yeah, and
socially or even spiritually, socially, and I see that there's these two parts, and you're trying to prepare them for what in a yeshiva setting, right, on a day-to-day basis in your schedule. So how would it look? Well, taking on the first one, how would it look in the practical, physical part where you're helping them take on jobs? Do you have a panel of mentors? Do you have a panel of people who are experts in certain areas that can train them in? And then the second area I'd ask on is the self-development part. How does that look like? And right, that's the name of the Yeshiva, Binyan Odom. And I think you'd agree, Yassin, and knowing your self-development is one of the most important things, and knowing ourselves and knowing the world around us, and having a healthy mind, mental health, emotional health is really important, and something that's as great as the yeshiva system is that we've gone through. They could improve in the areas of emotional health and mental health, helping the Bachram, helping the students with that. And I know that for you, that's a huge part of it, part of yourself, of your life experience, and of the yeshiva. So in those two areas, if we can hear kind of a bit, how would that look on like a day-to-day basis, really?
yes, that's really great, and I'm really glad you put those 2 points to one after the other, because to me they are really connected. Just to share my philosophy in general before getting to the detail of it, that my own experience of looking for a job informed me a lot on this, but also looking around and observing people searching for jobs. And just one particular anecdote I remember so clearly, when I moved first from Israel to Manchester, and I was just basically looking for anything that I could do as a job. I was around, what should I say, 2 months. So he was asking, looking, networking, just doing my bit. I didn't really know what I was doing or looking for. And I found a job at the time which was suitable. And I remember meeting a friend of mine who was slightly older than me, who had moved back from Israel some time before me, and he still hadn't found a job. So he had a longer period of time. He was talented. He could have got something. And I remember speaking to him after I had gotten my job, and I sort of was saying to him, why haven't you got a job, or what's going on? He said, there's no jobs. It's just, there's no jobs about. And I remember thinking to myself, what do you mean there's no jobs about? There was lots of opportunities that I looked at, thank God I got my job. He could also have gotten a job. And that's when I started to realize, this thing about getting a job, finding a job, is not something that stands alone. It's something that it really is part of a wholesome package, which is our human experience. And in that experience will be included our mental health, our mental well-being, our confidence, self-esteem. All of that is so much part of the so-called job search. If someone just looks at job search as being a standalone thing, I don't think that's going to serve them as best, as if they look at job search as part of a much bigger package of development. Let's develop. Let's see what I'm about. Let's see what life has for me. Let's see what purpose and meaning there is in life. And then as I'm thinking and contemplating these things and becoming clearer about that, let's see what avenues there are for me to pursue job-wise. That to me, one is born out of the other, basically. So that's kind of the general approach I have. By nature, I'm quite an optimistic person. I'm quite an opportunist, and I think that it's an important thing to enthuse people with the positivity of life and to realize that there's plenty of opportunity out there. There's plenty of jobs out there. There's always opportunities to make money. It's the real question you have to ask yourself first is, who am I and what I have to bring to the table and what I'm looking for in life. And once you have a clarity of some sort about that, the job will be born out of that. So that's just in general terms how I see it. So in practical terms, look, ultimately it's a yeshiva. And the reality is, part of the balance I have to play, because it's a new type of yeshiva, as we've discussed, and we're looking to achieve sort of a unique set of goals, really. Because as I say, a normal yeshiva is learning all day, and that's where it stops. I have to play the game carefully so that I don't ostracize, number one, the potential boys from coming, because if they see what I'm doing as a different beast, as something weird or off the beaten track or very, very unique, then it will put them off. People like doing things what's so-called is normal. And secondly, given the society that we live in, I don't want to wind anyone up or tread on anyone's toes. And if someone gets wind of this yeshiva that seemed to be doing things far too dramatically different, I could cause more trouble than it's worth. So for me, there's a little bit of a game over here in trying to play the normal card. You know, this is a totally normal and regular yeshiva. We learn all day, just as you do in other yeshivas. There's just a few tweaks of a difference in terms of different elements of our day, and also the attitude that we have as the educators in the yeshiva. Because as you said, you mentioned briefly and correctly, often in yeshiva, the emotional well-being or the mental state of students, of anyone really, is not something to consider. The only thing that matters is how well you are learning, how much you understand the Gemara, the Shia, you know, the complex question of the topic, whatever it is. But actually how you're feeling, how you're getting through your day. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you worried about anything? Is something on your mind? None of that really matters too much in the normal yeshiva. And as I said, if ultimately what we're doing here is trying to prepare people for life, even from a pure job search perspective, I want them to come at it with their best. I want them to feel raring to go and ready to just search for and grab the opportunities of life. So for me, even from that minor perspective, it's integral that they are in a good frame of mind and they are comfortable with themselves. But then much deeper than that, just as a successful person, you want them to be wholesome. You want them to approach life with a mindset that's going to be helpful for them and not just trip themselves up with their own struggles.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, I was just going to say, so in terms of the sort of the order of the day on a daily basis, you know, it's still going to be centered around the regular 3 periods of storim a day where people learn. So you've got 3 set pieces in the day. But what I'm doing is I'm bringing in a little bit at the beginning of a day, a discussion time where we can talk about more broader things. At the end of the day, we're having a broader discussion time as well on different topics. We're going to bring in guest speakers, both from the rabbinic sort of group and also from the business world. Again, being careful in terms of how this is termed and what the title is and who they are, playing the game well, but ultimately broadening the minds of those coming to the yeshiva so that they get to hear from different types of people and have plenty of opportunity to discuss and to develop and to probe further. And just if I can just say on the point of the business input, I am putting together a top team of business advisors. To begin with, there'll be Jewish Orthodox business advisors who will be on hand to give a few hours a month to individual boys and to speak to the guys as a group as well, and to talk to them about life, about business, about what to expect. I mean, even the simple point of view, which I think is very common, a common mistake amongst many of the from Haredi sort of society, of those who are not in business. You know, the way they think about business is that you just get a job and then the next step is basically you're a millionaire. Like there's a very quick route to wealth once you get a job. And as we know, the reality is it's not like that at all. And even just as a simple reality check, you know, for them to hear that, for them to consider that, for them to contemplate that, what does that mean? What does wealth mean? You know, all of those opportunities to give them all of that. And once we have a clarity, once we have them in a place where they are being realistic about expectations, about what they can do in life, about the opportunities available to them, then we move into sort of phase 2, which is to actually give them apprenticeship opportunities, get them into businesses, get them out there into industries they're interested in that. Check in with them 3 months later, say, okay, should we pursue this further? Do you want to try something else? So overall, when they walk out after 2 years, they've had both a theoretical sort of education in terms of what to expect from the business world and what it means to function as a business person in this world, and also aware of the opportunities there are. And at the same time, they've also had a practical experience and got their feet wet.
That's really amazing. The one thing that you mentioned that really hit a chord by me was, you think about the age of these guys, right? So how old are these guys? The age of the guys that are going to be in the yeshiva?
19, 20.
Right. So I remember when I was 19 or 20, I was learning in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. And it could be a really rough time, that age. I mean, you're coming out of your teen years, you're coming into the 20s, you're becoming like a real person, right? You're like actually taking on responsibility in life for the first time, and you're kind of being independent really for the first time, really independent, and preparing
Yeah.
for a life of it being independent.
Yeah.
And it could be really rough. It could be really rough. It could be tough. It could be very challenging. And I remember when I was in yeshiva. I mean, I can speak of myself. I can speak about other people. There was a lot of depression. Even if it
Yeah.
wasn't officially
Sure.
labeled as depression, but a lot of guys were down sometimes. And
Sure.
and and there were I'm not there were to give credit. There were in certain yeshivas they had mashgichim or mentors that would or mashpia that would help guide people, but there wasn't an official person who in their capacity they were the kind of mental person to look over and make sure everyone is okay with mentally and emotionally. And I think it's amazing that you're doing that as well. I'd like to hear from you kind of how you see mental health, because we all know mental health is thrown around a lot, and it's kind of like the go-to word nowadays. And we as a community we haven't been so um, open towards psychology or the ideas of mental health until I think probably the past 15-20 years. We've opened up a lot. The Jewish community, Orthodox community around the world has opened up a lot to recognizing issues and dealing with them. And I think that's amazing. I think that's great. I think we're headed in a really positive direction. But then you have this word mental health that's always thrown around, and it's become kind of a cliche, and it's lost its meaning a bit. And I'm curious to hear from you. How do you see mental health? How do you see a healthy mind, a wholesome person? What if I was me or one of the listeners was a bacher, was a student that was applying for your yeshiva or in your yeshiva? What would they be hearing from you in that stage of life, or really in any stage of life, that would help them emotionally, mentally, and just as a person?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. It's a great question. And I will tell you that what's informing my answer is primarily the experiences that I had over the 2 years that we were together in the Rabbinic Training Academy. Because as you well know, the listeners don't necessarily know, is the focus of the Rabbinic Training Academy from an emotional health perspective was to teach us what is known sometimes as innate health, sometimes as the three principles approach to well-being. And without getting into detail of all of that, just the fundamental point, which really touched me and I really, really see to be true, is that every single human being has an abundance of emotional health already by nature. They have at their core total and complete 100% emotional health. And they could be on all sorts of life struggles, and they could, as we know, moment to moment, you could have all sorts of thoughts and all sorts of challenges, whether it's anxiety, depression, or other thoughts. But that's just a cover up. That's just an output of other elements of our experience. What there is at our core is total and complete 100% emotional health. And what that does is it points a person to, number one, feel better about themselves even from just get-go. It's the fact that you are reminded and that you are pointed back to yourself when you realize, I don't need anything, I don't need anyone, there's nothing out there that I need in order for me to be, so to speak, not broken, in order for me not to be shattered, in order for me to be whole, because I am whole. That is something, if someone sees to be true, it can be really, really touching and really helpful. Just to make a point of that, boys that I've spoken to in the last few weeks who've phoned up or inquired about the yeshiva, and they've shared with me some experiences which they've had, which were quite negative, and we were talking about them. It's really interesting to note that sometimes the most well-meaning policy of a yeshiva can be so destructive, not so much because whether people do or don't listen to it, but it's because of the guilt that they feel when they don't. So just as an example, and again, it depends, I don't know how familiar the listeners are with all this, but you'll know well, Levi, yeshivas have a particular they have this thing that everyone needs to turn up to Shacharis to do the morning Shacharis in the yeshiva. It's like a big deal, and some yeshivas will make a bigger deal out of it than others. I attended a yeshiva which went really ballistics about this particular point. There's a yeshiva which some of the boys who have gone to have phoned me to ask about my yeshiva, who said to me that there's a fine in the yeshiva. If you don't turn up to Shacharis, you turn up late, you get a fine from the yeshiva. Now, what I'm pointing to is the yeshiva, very well meaning. What they're trying to do is to get guys to come to Shacharis, which is a good thing. But what I feel the trick that they're missing is it's basically short-term gain for long-term pain. You're not actually educating anyone when you fine them for not turning up to Shacharis. You're not actually showing them anything new about their life. You're not actually teaching them anything. You're not actually giving them something that will be helpful for them longer term. You're just basically forcing them to comply. And what that does is, not only does it not inform them about the beauty or the importance of whatever it is you're trying to teach them, when they don't turn up, their guilt builds up and they feel terrible about not having attended Shacharis. So you really don't gain. For me, the number one thing is for everyone to realize, it's not about whether you are fined or you're not fined for Shacharis. It's not about whether you keep to someone else's idea of what you ought to be doing. It's on you. It is totally and completely on you. You have everything it takes to live a totally successful, healthy life. And it's about tapping into your inner wisdom. You have what it takes. And that to me is a powerful lesson of emotional well-being. Because if you really see that, then nothing should faze you. Now, we'll have our moments, of course. I have them plenty. You become discouraged, you become despaired, you doubt yourself. Of course, and that's totally normal and totally natural, but always point back to the truth. You have what it takes and it's on you. And I feel this point goes together with the second point. I feel, again, having had reinforced again and again throughout the experiences that we had on the program together, but it goes very well together and informs one another, is this idea of independence. Our rabbi who headed the program, Rabbi Rosenblatt, was a Talmud of Rav Noach Weinberg of Eish in Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Noach Weinberg apparently said a sentence which went something like this: without independence, there's no starting point. If a person doesn't have independence, then there's no one to talk to, there's no one home. And to me, that ties together with the first point. For as long as we think we are dependent on, and then fill in the blank, whether it's a happy marriage, a warm family, a functioning society, fill in whatever you want in that blank. As long as you think that you need something or someone out there for me to have a good and successful life, then you're missing a trick. And this is pointing in the same direction that the first point was pointing into, which is I have what it takes. And I have been given everything I need to make something of my life. And it's on me. I feel that this is something completely absent from education in conventional schools and yeshivas. It is completely absent. We are so into creating the right environment. We're so into creating policies that make sure people comply with. Again, very well-meaningly so, very innocently. We create no smoking policies, and we create no girlfriends policies. We create. I just spoke to someone last week who said, he works in a yeshiva, and they noticed boys were having an Instagram account, which he felt was detrimental to their experience of spiritual growth. So he called them all in, and he made them delete their Instagram account. Used every threat in the book, and he made them delete it. And I was talking afterwards to my wife about this story, and I was saying to my wife again the same thing. Well done, you've made them delete their Instagram account. If you thought that was some sort of thing they needed to do, but you haven't taught them anything. You haven't shown them a way. You haven't educated them to see what you're trying to. In other words, the Instagram yes or no is born out of a truth that you see. Obviously, it's not just so to speak, a jukin cup. It's not just one of those things that I just fancy them doing. I seriously see a truth here, something at the core of whatever it is, which I feel Instagram is a problem. Well, you have to share that. You have to show them that. And if they don't see that, then there's no or little value to getting them to shut down their account, because that's just making them be robots. So there's no point in that. And to me, all of those things, sorry, it's such a long-winded answer, but it's all about pointing back to the individual. It's all about, listen, I'm not making you do anything. You're 19, 20. You know what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not up to doing that, then I'll do everything possible to help you. But helping you doesn't mean I'll replace your own responsibility, your own, get up and do it. You've got your life to live. No one is living it for you. And that can be quite a harsh lesson if it's taught on its own. But if it's taught combined with this understanding that you have the resilience and you have what it takes, you have everything you need. No one needs to give you anything. You've got it all there already. I think it can be such a empowering sort of approach.
Yeah, that's exactly the word I've been thinking the entire time is empowering. Because you can have a yeshiva system or any school system or any system where you have rules and one of the main, and you have a big focus on rules. And if someone breaks the rules, then all you got to do is go to them and say, you broke this rule. This is the punishment. This is the consequence. And you're not breaking this rule again, right? So there's no education involved. There's no empowerment involved. It's just keeping the rules of the school for the sake of keeping the structure and the rules. But you're forgetting about the individual, right? We think about, a lot of times we think about the cloud, we think about the community, we think about the whole school, the student body, but a lot of times we forget, and it's innocently, but we forget about the individual. And I love what you're saying, because what you're doing in essence, like you said, is empowering every individual, right? And a guy comes along and if he's told that he has the power to do what he needs to do, and if he slips up, it's okay. And everything he needs really is within him. He has the wisdom within him. And he doesn't have to be dependent on a million things and sell his brain to the world. You know, he can have his own brain, and he can independently think within a yeshiva, right? And he can be, and it's so empowering for him. And you have a guy who, let's say, would sleep in, till I see guys sleep until 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and just because they were just in a bad place and they weren't finishing the Masechta, they weren't finishing the whatever quote of study they needed to do, or they weren't excelling in the shir and the class as much as everyone else was. And I can imagine, I went through stages of that. I think everyone's gone through stages like that. And you look at yourself and you fall into depression, and you say, listen, I'm not fitting the standards of the yeshiva. I'm not fitting the rules. I can't live by the rules. I can't live by the standards. And that's it. I'm a waste of space, and I might as well just turn up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Essentially what you're doing is telling them that, no, you have the power to do what you need to do. You have the health, you have the wisdom. It's all there. You might slip up. You might not be up to pace with other guys in the class, and that's or in the share, but that's totally fine. You're finding your place, and yeah, you have the potential to do whatever you need to do.
That's right.
And I imagine I was told that, or friends of mine that were told that when they were in like a really bad place at certain times in yeshiva, and a bad place as in bad place in their mind. And imagine if I had someone come over to me and telling me, you know what, Levi, you know what, maybe you're not excelling right now at this time of the year, or you're feeling a bit down or worn out or burnt out, but you know what, you have the power to do what you got to do, and you have the wisdom within you. Maybe take a bit of a break, come back to it, find a peaceful place in your mind. It would have been a much easier experience for me, and I think a lot of other guys. I think it's amazing that you're empowering people. And essentially that's the name of the yeshiva. I keep coming back to that because I love the name. It's Binyan Odom, right? You're building the person. It's not Binyan Yeshiva. It's Yeshivas Binyan Odom, not Odom Binyan Yeshiva. You know, you're the yeshiva's building the person, not the person building the yeshiva.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny you say that, because one of the small pushbacks I had from a few individuals really embedded in the core, real McCoy of the yeshiva system was they were very concerned about the name. And I remember sort of asking, like, what's the concern? And they're like, a yeshiva needs to have the word Torah in its name. You know, like, you're just talking about building people or something. You know, it needs to be about Torah. And it's funny you say that, because, you know, those that understand what we're actually trying to achieve understand that, yes, of course, ultimately it's about Torah, it's about religion, it's about orthodoxy. That's what we are. That's what we believe the truth is. But you're talking about human beings first and foremost. And yes, you point people in the right direction by showing them what they already have. You're halfway there. You know, they'll be thirsty for more. They'll want to learn more. But if you miss out the first half, you either end up with a bunch of robots who are doing the right thing, but not because they really see it to be the case, but just because they have to do the right thing. or you end up with a whole bunch of people feeling disenfranchised, not really knowing what's going on, upset. I had a conversation with someone today who's 22, and he was a few months ago interested in joining the yeshiva. So we had a conversation, and it took time for me to get hold of him. Spoke to him again today, and he was very concerned about coronavirus. So he couldn't sort of give thought to the possibility of joining. I'm hopefully opening September, and he couldn't think of that because it was too, what about coronavirus? He was very, very concerned about that. Okay. But what struck me was, this guy is 22 years old. And he said to me, but don't worry about me not being busy or anything like that, because I'm playing FIFA. I'm cool. And of course I said to him, look, I mean, I'm not here to make you busy or not. You're keeping yourself busy. That's great. I was going to offer you an opportunity to further your growth, etc. And we'll obviously, when coronavirus is blown over, we can talk more about that. But it struck me that at 22 years old, the best form of activity he has, he's in other words, he's totally satisfied at the moment to spend his time, withering his time away, playing games or whatever it is. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a person playing a game and watching a film or whatever it is, of course. But for a person to be satisfied at that level, to spend their entire time doing that, it struck me, this is a boy who doesn't see anything in his life. He doesn't see there's a route for him to be bothered to do anything, to get out of his chair and to, yes, coronavirus limits us all. We all understand that, but there's so much we can do still. And there's no raring to go. There's no drive. There's no sense of purpose. And to me, that was the saddest point of realization, the saddest thing to realize. There's just a hole there. And, just to empower people to see there's so much more you can get to. You can, it's not about keeping to the rules. It's not about doing tick box Judaism. It's not about doing tick box life. You get a job and you go home and you build a family. There's so much more that a person can express, that a person can find, life is so much more rich with opportunity than to limit it to simply a bunch of rules. I've had a number of questions coming through from potential applicants about what's your yeshiva position on phones, because it's very common in the yeshivas, obviously, to either ban phones or have very strong restrictions on phones. Or, if you're caught with a phone in my yeshiva that I attended, you're out. That's it. You're thrown out. It's interesting because one of the things that has informed my approach to thinking about the yeshiva over the months was an experience I had a number of years ago, about 5 years ago. I was working in one of the yeshivas in England, tutoring one-to-one a boy who was 18, very sweet, very clever, not very clever, very regular kid. He just was one of those that didn't fit in the box. He was his own mind. He sort of was a bit of a rebel, bit of a character, totally fine with me. And one of the things he did was he smoked. And the yeshiva policy, it was a small yeshiva, but the yeshiva policy was you weren't allowed to smoke. And he was seen smoking outside in public, which the yeshiva really panicked from a PR perspective. This was considered real crisis. So the boy was suspended and sent home for the weekend. Very unusual for a yeshiva to suspend a boy, so it was obviously considered to be real high crimes and misdemeanor. He was sent home, and he came back, and we had good conversations together. We got on well together, and the arrangement yeshiva made with him was he can't smoke outside because it's publicly terrible PR. So he has to smoke in one of the members of staff's garden every time he wants a cigarette. I mean, just the ridiculousness of that sort of condition. You travel up the road 5 minutes till you get to this guy's garden if you want to have a cigarette. That's the only way you can have. Okay, it was yeshiva policy. They were upholding that. That's what they felt was a priority. Well, it didn't take long, a few weeks later, for him to be back at his old game again. He was caught behind a building somewhere smoking, and they threw him out. And they phoned me. I wasn't a member of the yeshiva. I was just an outside tutor that had called in. But they phoned me to ask if I could basically help this boy pack and go, because the boy was so broken by this expulsion that he needed someone on hand. And what I went through the next hour really broke my heart. You know, I saw a boy who was sweet, a boy who had such a, you know, there's a Jewish word called chen. He was just such a beautiful neshama, such a beautiful kid, so young, such a life ahead of him. And he was being carted off for smoking. And I walked into the office of the mashgiach, one of the instrumental people in his expulsion, and I said to him, "What are you doing to this kid?" You know, the kid had said to me, "They throw me out." He told me this prior to the expulsion. "They throw me out, and I'm not staying religious. I can't take this. I won't be able to take it." I said, "You're killing a kid." And he looked at me and he said, "I hear what you're saying, but I've got to respect the yeshiva policy." And I said to him these words, and I'm not being dramatic, it's true. I said to him, "I never want to be in a position that you find yourself in now, which is you're going to sacrifice the individual for the sake of the policy of the yeshiva." And he was dead quiet. And lo and behold, that kid went to the Israeli army, and today he's not religious. And I've tried reaching out to him since. He's not interested. And it's just such a sad story. And it, thank God, doesn't happen all too often to that extreme. But the concept, as we've been saying, that there's a policy in place for how the yeshiva decides is right for how people ought to behave. You know, it doesn't take into consideration the individual needs and the individual story. Where's the guy up to? What's it about? You know, so when I answer these people who ask me about the yeshiva policy, before I answer them, I say, look, the yeshiva has to have a policy because, again, part of the game of running an institution is people expect you to have all these policies, so I'll have them because I need to have them. But if you want to know my genuine belief, if a kid wants to have a smartphone, I'd rather he makes that choice according to where he's at, rather than according to the yeshiva policy.
I think it's amazing. I think it goes along with the whole ethos of the yeshiva, right? Empowering people, letting people be independent and realize themselves where they're holding and decide on that. I'm curious. Yeah. No, go.
I was just going to say that it's interesting because this very point, I kind of have two minds about, because on the one hand, by nature, I'm quite, if I'm loyal to something, I can follow it to the letter. Like I'm quite like that. I'll do the rules, I'll tick the boxes, do exactly what's asked of me. There's another part of me that's quite a rebel and that doesn't like authority and doesn't like to run along. I want to do it my way. I want to do it independently. And it's interesting that I've recognized I've got both of those sort of opposite traits. And when I was part of the Rabbinic Training Academy, together with yourself, so I, for the most part, had a role different to the other guys because I was also helping out running the logistics of the program whilst participating in the program. And I learned a tremendous amount from my interaction with the staff just on that level of running the logistics. And it was a very, very helpful experience for me, watching how Rabbi Rosenblatt, let's say, with his expectations of how people should behave or how the participants of the program should conduct themselves, he had a whole load. He wanted things to be done or things to be kept in certain ways, but to watch him, how he approached the matter, not from an official line of, well, as a program, we've decided this is what has to happen. Now all of you just step up to it and do it, and then get annoyed and disappointed when people don't do it. But rather to watch him set the standard, have the expectation, express it well, but then basically leave it up to the guys. And those who do as he wanted, great. And those who don't do as he wanted, it's their loss. And he genuinely saw it that way. Yeah. For me, that was a remarkable experience. And again, really helped me in, thinking about this.
And if you communicate it that way, if you communicate it in a way where you're giving people the clear direction and then saying, make the choice, it's so much truer to them than if they have a rule and they just have to keep in that box, and if they break out of that box, then they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Now, I love what you said. I'm curious. I'm curious what if you faced any challenges and pushback from the community. You mentioned a bit of it before. Maybe you could tell us of a specific instance, if it could be said on camera, on recording,
So
and also not just if there was pushback, but why you think there is that pushback from the community.
look, I think that as a community, we are desperately protective over what we consider to be authentic Torah Judaism. And, we've been around for long enough to have had many challenges from the inside, from the outside, that over the generations have perhaps attempted to dilute the truth, to change it subtly and sometimes not so subtly. And we have a very protective culture over what we consider to be authentic Torah Judaism, which I think is understandable, and it's a good thing on the one hand. But what that also doesn't do is it doesn't breed a culture of change, a culture of understanding things differently, flexibility, acceptance of others. It can come down quite harsh sometimes, unnecessarily. And this is something I have been aware of and conscious of since embarking on this mission. I'm waiting for that sledgehammer to come down and to decry what I'm trying to do as something foreign to authentic Torah Judaism, and to either look to close it down or to ostracize. And I have been so far blessed that either it's simply complete help from above, or it's a little bit of the game that I've been trying to play in the balance I've been trying to set, or a bit of both. But I haven't yet had that sledgehammer, which I'm very grateful for. I haven't yet been accosted or been threatened to be a danger to authentic, Torah Judaism, which I'm very grateful for, because I can see how hotheads might view it if they get the wrong end of the stick. I have had comments from potential donors and from just people saying, "Are you sure you've got this right? Have you checked with Rabbonim? This is very serious matters, trying to sort of encourage boys to move on from full day learning and that sort of thing." Excuse me. Most of this I don't engage with, because, as I've said to someone, I don't need the support of everybody in this project. Obviously, I need the donors, but I don't need the public to think this is a great idea. I just need 10 boys. And what I've learned from conversations I've had is, if you're a parent, you can have all the ideological expectations you want about authentic Torah Judaism, but at 19 years old, you want the best for your kid. And if your kid's been through mainstream, regular, conventional yeshivas, and is either not done well or has done well but reached a point where you feel something else is required, you're not going to worry too much about which rabbi sanctioned what. You'll just ask, what's this yeshiva about? And after a conversation, yeah. And after a conversation with myself or reading the literature, you get to see, actually, maybe this is a good idea, and nothing else seems to matter at that point. Look, I've had many conversations with people who I wanted originally to bring on to the yeshiva staff. People sort of have varying degrees of understanding about basically Binyan Odom, about what it means to build people. And it's interesting, it's curious to me that there's a school of thought out there, which, actually, thinking back to my yeshiva days, I probably believed to a degree myself at one point in my life. But I think it's a mistake, which is that Torah solves everything. And just give a guy Torah and he has everything. And if you believe that school of thought, then there's no need for all this stuff, so to speak. Just get them into Torah. And I just think it's a mistake. I just think, as we said, I think you need to build people. You need to be talking to a human being. Torah is, so to speak, the cherry on the cake. If you have a well-functioning human being, an emotionally healthy human being, you can give them Torah and it will make their life even better. But if
the Torah is talking to emotionally I mean, it's talking to everyone, but it's talking to someone who, common sense, right? They say like the fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch, the fifth volume or section of Jewish law, right, is basically common sense, because the Torah is talking to a person assuming that they're using the capabilities that they were given by God, which is common sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Common sense is not so common, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, I don't pretend to anybody that I am more than I am. I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I'm not saying that, I'm the greatest gift of wisdom to mankind in any way. And the truth is, I've taken the position to speak of being Rosh Yeshiva. And as you know, discussions we've had as a group, but also for myself, I've had a lot of, before I decided that, I was quite reluctant to do that, because in our society, the position of Rosh Yeshiva, the position of Dean of the Yeshiva, is a sort of a distinguished position, and it says something about the character of the person. It says something about his level of knowledge of Torah, etc. And it's not to be dismissed. And here I am, for all that people might say it's just being humble, I know who I am, and I know that I'm not up to that level of distinguished, whatever it is, claim to fame. However, it's a yeshiva which I feel is important and serving a very, very, very important purpose. And if I want to lead this thing, then I'm just going to lead it. And, if people feel they need something of higher quality, something of more Torah, so to speak, than what I could offer, by all means, go find somewhere else. But this is definitely, one of the mashkichim, I spoke to one of the people working in one of the yeshivas, after explaining what I wanted to achieve. He said to me, it sounds like you're offering something that really every yeshiva bacher should have the experience of. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. and then what they probably followed up with was, and if the yeshivas are not doing that, so that means that it probably isn't necessary. Because if it was necessary, it's necessary for everyone, and if it's not being done, it's probably not necessary for everyone. But yeah, it is funny. Yes, I want to ask you, who's your inspiration? One person.
I have to limit it to one person?
How do you not limit it to one person? It doesn't have to be a person. It could be an idea. It could be a book. It could be a feeling.
Okay, so I'll tell you three, but it's not. Three is.
I don't want a biography on each one. Just.
Okay, Rabbi Moshe Sherer, United States. Okay, he's someone for a long time. I've read his biography. There's a big biography by Jonathan Rosenblum, I think it is. It took him 10 years to make. Very, very big, thick biography. It's got a lot of detail about his work with Aguda. For those who don't know, he was the president, I think, of Agudas Yisrael for many, many years. I didn't know this till recently, that the Novominsker Rebbe, who was just recently passed away, actually took over Rabbi Moshe Sherer. I mean, he had that position which Moshe Sherer had. I never realized that, yeah. So it's interesting. He was in a position of influence, but what you see that I didn't know him personally, obviously, but what you see from his biography is he was a person who really wanted to achieve good for the Klal, wanted to achieve good for Klal Yisrael, but he came at it from such a place of humility, a place of softness, of kindness. There's often, for me, this was certainly the case, there's often a challenge when you're trying to achieve something, not to fall into the trap of the end justifies, how's it work? The end justifies the means. Yeah. So let's go at it like a bulldozer. Let's just make sure we get it done. But along the way, you upset this one, you knock this one out of the way. And this is one of my challenges. I mean, thank God today I'm better with it than I ever was. But I would often be blind to that and be so focused on the goal that I would knock, innocently people along the way without meaning to. And then actually you think, well, have I really done the right thing if I've achieved the achievement, but really along the way that it's being littered with damage? And Ramosha Shara, to me, strikes me as a person who was really conscious of that, cognizant of that. Like he knew it's about doing things in the right way, not just about the result. So his energy, his drive, his goal for doing good for Klal Yisrael at the same time as balancing that with a softness and understanding of different people and getting on with people, to me is really, really quite a big role model in my mind. Very briefly, my full Hebrew name is Yosef Shlomo, and I'm named after the Ponovitch Yerov. And my parents sort of knew him a little bit. He used to come and visit my grandmother way back when. And again, I don't know too much about him, but the little that I've heard about him has really genuinely inspired me, because he was a builder. Yes, he was a Rosh Yeshiva, but before Rosh Yeshiva, he was a builder of world Jewry, one of the real contributors to the rebuilding of the Jewish people after the Holocaust. And again, he didn't spend his time. He was much of a people's person. And there's a famous story of him standing, at the end of the war, standing on that hill where Ponevezh Yeshiva was essentially built afterwards, and him saying, "Here will be a yeshiva," and people thought he was bonkers. In fact, not so well known is that the Chevron Rosh Yeshiva, I can't remember his name now, the second, took him to see a psychiatrist because he was worried how mentally ill the Ponevezh Rav must have been to have said that dream at that point. Like, you crazy, the world's falling apart. But he wasn't, he can dream but he's not asleep was the line I think he said. He's, again, the vision, the almost like to have that chutzpah, to dream such good for a future, and to drive and to do what was necessary to build to that future. And alongside being good with people, being understanding of people, learning with all sorts of different types of people. There was no cliche around him. There was no schnit. There was no, elite sort of approach at all. To me, that really talked to me. And I'll just say briefly, finally, there's the famous, in the Lithuanian world of Musa, there was a famous individual called the Alta of Slobodka. I think his name was Horowitz. And he had a particular train of thought within the Musa sort of movement, but which actually, by the way, was Gadlus Odom, which means the greatness of man. So, it definitely appeals to me, his teaching. But as a person, he didn't just build his own yeshiva. He took Bochrim from his own yeshiva and sent them to other yeshivas to help the other yeshivas be built. It's remarkable. He never took an official position in his own yeshiva. He sort of stayed in the background, pulling all the strings, making sure it ran like he wanted it to, but never took any credit, never took any fame for it. He never wrote any sforim. He never wrote any books. He said, "My books are my students. Let me invest in people." I mean, this is remarkable. This is all about the general philosophy that I'm trying to live up to and trying to build towards, building people, believing in people. People are great. Let people see the opportunity that's there for them. And it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about individuals. It's about the purity of what we're trying to achieve, what we're able to achieve, the spirituality that's available to us at our fingertips.
Very cool. I like those three. I want to know if you had, last question for you, Yossi. I'll let you go. If you had one person you could flesh it out with, one person, could be in present time, it could be in history, one person you could sit down, flesh it out, talk it out, who would it be? One of the people you would do. I don't want to pin you down to one.
So it's an interesting question, and I've never thought about that, to be honest. The person that comes to mind almost immediately is the Chofetz Chaim. I just really want to understand how he saw the world, how he saw people. He wrote a tremendous amount of Sfarim. He's well known for his Sefer Chofetz Chaim, obviously, but he wrote Mishnah Berurah, he wrote other things. He wrote for soldiers in the army. He wrote all sorts of things. And he was a man who lived in a hovel. He lived in a shed. Lived to a ripe old age, seemingly managing to impact in such a significant way, both from a halacha perspective, but also from a general leadership perspective. And I would just love to, to see what it was all about and how he sees the world really, and to really get an insight into his greatness.
Very cool. Yossi, people want to find out about your yeshiva. Where are they going? Where are they looking?
Okay, the best thing to do is to contact me directly. Should I say my phone number, my email address, whatever you want?
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to get in touch, by all means, very welcome to. So my cell phone is...
Just by the way, the yeshiva is based in Manchester, so I think we mentioned that. But,
okay, yeah, based in Manchester, but also servicing all of UK. I mean, obviously, coronavirus does create various logistical issues with this, because how do you dorm boys and all the rest of it? So we'll be looking carefully at that and trying to work it out. hopefully coming to a solution in time. So my phone number is 07873 522 911. Alternatively, you can email me office@Binyan Odom. That's BINYANODOM. office@binyanodom.co.uk. I think there's a message facility on this podcast, I believe. So in the very worst case, that doesn't work for you, or you want to be reminded of my details, by all means, message Levi, and hopefully he'll get so bombarded by all you guys interested.
Yeah.
But by all means, get in touch. Let's have a chat.
Okay, awesome, Yossi. Thank you so much for being on. And I think it's awesome. Yossi's a practical guy. He has an idea. He runs with it. Doesn't care about the old, the eyes of people, the googly eyes of people. But he gets it done. So Yossi, thanks for that. Thanks for making the world a better place.
Thank you, Levi. Thank you for having me on. And by the way, if this was good and you liked it, I'll come on again.
Yeah, we'd love to have you again. We'd love to have you. Thanks, Yossi.